Have you ever noticed how some dishes seem to carry a memory inside them? The moment the pot starts to warm, the kitchen changes, and suddenly everything feels calmer, slower, more welcoming. That's exactly the feeling I get with this traditional Brazilian galinhada, a rustic, complete meal that smells like home and tastes like the countryside. It's the kind of dish that brings people closer to the table without needing any fancy presentation, because its charm is in its honesty. Today, I'm making a version inspired by the traditions of Goiás and Minas Gerais, where simple ingredients are transformed into something deeply satisfying. And right from the start, there's one step that makes all the difference: searing the chicken really well. This isn't just a detail, and it definitely isn't something to rush. When the chicken hits the hot pan and starts to brown, it builds the foundation of the entire recipe. That golden surface brings depth, color, and a flavor that water alone could never create. Skipping this step is one of the most common mistakes, and it can leave the final dish tasting flat instead of rich and full. So imagine the sound of the chicken browning, the aroma rising from the pan, and the kitchen filling with that unmistakable rustic scent. After that, the flavor grows even more when garlic, onion, and tomato go into the pan, softening together and releasing their juices. Then comes the rice, followed by turmeric, which gives the dish its warm yellow color and its beautiful, earthy fragrance. It's a simple combination, but when each ingredient is treated with care, the result feels almost magical. This is the kind of recipe that feeds both body and spirit. It brings protein, energy, and comfort in one generous pot, making it perfect for a family lunch or a peaceful weekend meal. And if you've been enjoying recipes like this, take a moment to leave a like, because it helps more people discover traditional Brazilian cooking. Now I want to ask you something while this dish begins to take shape. What's your biggest curiosity about Brazil? I'd love to know. And if you enjoy learning these classic recipes with me, make sure you're subscribed, because what comes next is where the real flavor starts to build. When the chicken hits the hot pan, that's when the whole kitchen starts to change. You hear that strong sizzle, you see the skin turning golden, and little by little the meat begins to release all that flavor we want in a true Brazilian galinhada. This step may seem simple, but it's the heart of the recipe. If the chicken isn't well seared, the dish can taste flat, almost like something is missing. And for a rustic meal like this, that deep brown flavor makes all the difference. As the pieces of chicken cook, the aroma starts to fill the room in a way that feels almost nostalgic. It's the kind of smell that reminds you of a farmhouse kitchen, a Sunday lunch, or a table where everyone arrives hungry and stays talking long after the plates are empty. I like to let the chicken take its time here, turning it until it has color on all sides, because this is where the dish begins to build character. A good galinhada is not rushed. It asks for patience, and it gives back comfort. Once the chicken is nicely browned, the onion goes in, and right away it starts to soften in the fat left in the pan. That's where the flavor becomes richer and more inviting. Then comes the garlic, and in just a few seconds, the whole kitchen changes again. The tomato follows, bringing moisture and a little acidity to balance everything. It's a beautiful contrast: the strength of the chicken, the sweetness of the onion, the sharp aroma of garlic, and the freshness of tomato all working together. Now the rice enters the scene, and this is where the galinhada begins to look complete. Each grain gets coated in those flavors before the liquid goes in, and that makes a huge difference in the final result. The turmeric gives the rice its golden color and that unmistakable earthy fragrance that is so loved in this kind of Brazilian cooking. It doesn't just color the dish, it gives it personality. Then everything is covered with hot water, just enough to cook slowly and evenly. From this point on, the stove does the work, and the house fills with a calm, steady aroma that promises a hearty meal ahead. While it simmers, the rice softens, the chicken becomes even more tender, and the broth slowly disappears into the grains. It's the kind of cooking that feels almost therapeutic, like the dish is coming together on its own, one gentle bubble at a time. If this kind of recipe already makes you hungry, leave a like and stay with me, because in a moment I'm going to show you the final touches that make this galinhada look and taste even more special. Once the chicken is beautifully browned on all sides, you can already feel the dish taking on a deeper personality. That golden layer at the bottom of the pan is exactly where the flavor begins, and it's worth every extra minute. This is the kind of step that seems simple, but in a rustic Brazilian recipe like galinhada, it makes all the difference. If you've ever wondered why some versions taste richer and more comforting than others, the answer often starts right here. And if this tip is already helpful, leave a like so more people can discover the heart of Brazilian home cooking. Now the kitchen starts to smell like the countryside. In goes the chopped onion, slowly softening in the chicken fat, followed by the garlic, which brings that unmistakable aroma that feels like home. A little tomato joins the pan too, adding freshness and color, and everything begins to come together in a way that looks humble but tastes unforgettable. At this point, it's not just cooking anymore, it's building layers of flavor, the kind that remind you of Sunday lunch at a family table, with everyone waiting for the pot to finish and the conversation quietly growing around it. Next comes the rice, and this is where galinhada really starts to reveal itself. The grains are stirred gently, so they can absorb all that goodness from the pan before the liquid is added. Then comes the turmeric, the ingredient that gives the dish its warm golden color and its earthy fragrance. It doesn't just make the food look beautiful, it gives the whole recipe that signature caipira feeling, simple and deeply satisfying. This is the moment when the dish turns from a sautéed base into a true complete meal, full of body, comfort, and personality. After that, hot water goes in gradually, enough to cover everything and let the rice cook slowly without losing its texture. The pan is lowered to a gentle simmer, and now patience becomes part of the recipe. Little by little, the broth reduces, the chicken becomes even more tender, and the rice drinks in every bit of flavor from the seasonings and the meat. This is also where that common mistake would ruin the result. If the chicken hadn't been well seared from the start, the broth would be flatter, and the final taste would not have the same depth. So yes, that first step really matters. While it cooks, I like to imagine the people who might sit down to eat this dish, a family arriving hungry, someone lifting the lid and smiling at the smell, children waiting for the first spoonful. There's something generous about galinhada. It fills the house, fills the plate, and somehow fills the heart too. And while it finishes cooking, tell me in the comments, what's your biggest curiosity about Brazil? And if you enjoy recipes like this, subscribe so you don't miss the final touch that brings this galinhada to life. Once the chicken is beautifully seared and that golden fond is sitting at the bottom of the pan, that's when the recipe really starts to come alive. You can already feel the difference in the aroma, deeper, richer, more rustic. This is the kind of smell that fills the kitchen and makes people wonder and asking, what's cooking? And that's exactly why this step matters so much. A good galinhada doesn't begin with the rice. It begins with the chicken taking its time, browning well, releasing flavor, and setting the foundation for everything that comes next. Then comes the classic base that gives this dish its home-cooked soul, garlic, onion, and tomato. As they hit the pan, the sound softens, the edges of the onion turn translucent, and the tomato starts to melt into the mixture, bringing a little acidity and a lot of color. It's simple, but it feels generous, like the kind of cooking that doesn't need to show off to be unforgettable. At this point, the kitchen already has that comforting countryside atmosphere, the kind that reminds you of a family table, a big pot, and everyone waiting for lunch to be ready. And of course, the rice goes in next, soaking up all those flavors before the liquid is added. This is where the turmeric makes its entrance, giving the dish that unmistakable yellow tone and a warm, earthy aroma that is so characteristic of traditional Brazilian galinhada. Just a little is enough to transform the whole pot. It's beautiful to watch the grains become coated, turning glossy and fragrant, as if they're already preparing to absorb every bit of seasoning in the pan. When the hot water goes in, everything changes again. The mixture loosens, the steam rises, and the dish begins its slow transformation into a complete meal. Now it's all about patience. The heat should be gentle enough to let the rice cook evenly while the chicken stays tender and the broth reduces naturally. This is not the moment to rush. If the fire is too high, the liquid disappears too quickly and the rice can end up uneven. But when it's done with care, the result is exactly what you want: loose, flavorful rice, juicy chicken, and that rustic texture that makes galinhada so loved across Goiás and Minas Gerais. And if you're enjoying this kind of traditional Brazilian recipe, take a moment to leave a like, because that really helps the channel grow. I also want to know, what's your biggest curiosity about Brazil? Is it the food, the culture, the countryside traditions, or something else that has always caught your attention? Keep watching, because in just a little while, we're going to finish this dish with the fresh touch that brings everything together. And now you can already feel it, that moment when the kitchen starts to smell like home. The chicken is beautifully browned, the bottom of the pan has all those golden bits that carry the real flavor, and this is exactly where the galinhada begins to take on its soul. I like to stir everything with patience, because in a dish like this, rushing is the enemy. First the garlic softens, then the onion turns sweet, and the tomato melts into the mixture, creating that rustic base that reminds you of a countryside lunch on a quiet Sunday. This is also the moment when the rice goes in, and you can see how it absorbs everything around it. A little turmeric is all it takes to give the dish that warm golden color and that unmistakable aroma that makes people start asking, "What's cooking?" If you've ever had a galinhada made the right way, you know this scent is impossible to forget. It's simple food, but it feels generous, comforting, and full of life. Now comes another important part, the hot water. Not cold, not lukewarm, but really hot, because that helps keep the cooking steady and allows the rice and chicken to finish together in harmony. I always say this recipe is almost like a conversation between ingredients. The chicken gives strength, the rice gives body, the seasonings give personality, and the broth ties everything together. As it simmers gently, the kitchen becomes quieter, and all you can hear is that soft bubbling sound that promises a complete meal. This is also why I keep insisting on that sear at the beginning. It may seem like a small detail, but it changes everything. Without it, the dish can taste flat, almost like something is missing. With it, the galinhada gains depth, color, and that homemade character that makes people go back for another spoonful. And honestly, who doesn't appreciate a recipe that feeds well, comforts deeply, and still feels practical for everyday life? A dish like this also has a special way of bringing people together. It's the kind of meal you serve when family is around, when friends stop by without warning, or when you simply want something wholesome on the table. At the end, when the rice is tender and the broth has nearly disappeared, that fresh finishing touch of parsley and green onions wakes everything up again. It adds brightness, color, and a gentle contrast to all that richness. If this recipe is making your mouth water already, leave a like so I know you're enjoying this journey with me. And I'm curious, what's your biggest curiosity about Brazil? Maybe it's the food, the traditions, the countryside, or the way families gather around the table. If you like recipes like this, stay close, because there's always more Brazilian flavor to share. And just like that, our Brazilian galinhada is ready, with that golden color, the tender chicken, and the rice cooked in all the flavor of the broth. This is the kind of dish that doesn't just fill the plate, it fills the house with a feeling of warmth, simplicity, and family. When you bring it to the table, there's always the little pause before the first bite, because everyone already knows something special is coming. Look at how the rice absorbed everything so beautifully, how the parsley and green onions bring freshness at the end, and how each spoonful carries the taste of countryside cooking done with care. That's what makes this recipe so loved in Goiás, Minas Gerais, and in so many Brazilian homes. It's honest food, the kind that speaks softly but leaves a strong memory. And if you pay attention to the details, you realize that nothing here is complicated. The magic is in the patience, in the sear, in the seasoning, and in letting the ingredients do their work together. If this recipe made your mouth water or brought back memories of a meal at someone's home, leave a like so more people can find this kind of simple, comforting Brazilian cooking. I'd also love to know in the comments, what's your biggest curiosity about Brazil? Is it the food, the traditions, the countryside, the music, or something else that always catches your attention? And if you enjoy recipes like this, made with clear steps, real flavor, and that true Brazilian feel, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. There's always another delicious dish waiting to come out of the kitchen, and I'd love to have you here for the next recipe.